The sun stood high over the razor wire when the prison gates swallowed him, and in that harsh midday light every mistake he had ever made felt carved into his skin. The concrete yard shimmered with heat, guard shadows stretched thin and sharp, and somewhere deep inside those walls a reputation was already being written for him without his consent. He was labeled weak the moment the cuffs came off, judged by the color of his skin, the quiet way he carried himself, and the calm eyes that refused to beg. What no one could see was the storm he had spent a lifetime learning to control, or the reason his hands trembled not with fear, but with restraint. That if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us humanity can survive even in the darkest places, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. Malachi Rowan had entered prison at midday, when everything was exposed and nothing could hide. The sun made the watchtowers gleam, the dust in the yard glow, and the men pacing behind fences look restless and hungry. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with a stillness that felt out of place among the constant noise. To the guards, he was just another number. To the inmates watching from behind narrowed eyes, he was fresh territory. No one knew that before the walls closed around him, Malachi had spent his life mastering a discipline that taught him to bend rather than break, to absorb violence without becoming it. He had promised himself long ago that his hands would only protect, never destroy. Prison would test that promise in ways he had never imagined. The first challenge came quietly, like a shadow sliding across the ground. In the yard, under the unforgiving sun, Malachi felt eyes tracking his every step. Whispers moved faster than he did, carried by men who survived by sensing weakness. At the center of those whispers was a name spoken with fear and admiration, a man who ruled the cell blocks through intimidation and carefully chosen brutality. Calder Voss was the prison gang leader, a figure shaped by years of unchecked power and rage. He had learned that dominance thrived in daylight, where humiliation could be witnessed and remembered. When he noticed Malachi's calm, his refusal to lower his gaze, something ugly sparked behind his eyes. Calm looked like defiance in a place built on submission. Malachi tried to keep to himself, spending his days cleaning, reading, and exercising in quiet corners of the yard. The sun traced its predictable arc overhead, marking time he could endure if he stayed invisible. But invisibility is a myth in prison. Calder's presence grew heavier, closer, until it felt like a storm cloud blocking the light. The first shove came without warning, a test disguised as an accident. Malachi absorbed it, steadying himself, refusing to react. Laughter rippled through the watching crowd, disappointment mixed with curiosity. Calder wanted spectacle. Malachi gave him silence. Inside, memories stirred of long mornings training under open skies, of sweat and discipline, of a teacher who believed strength was measured by what you chose not to do. The pressure mounted over days that burned bright and slow. Food trays were knocked aside, shoulders slammed into his path, threats carved into the air with cruel smiles. Each insult pressed against the wall Malachi had built inside himself. He struggled not because he lacked the ability to defend himself, but because he feared what would happen if he did. Violence had a way of rewriting a man's future in places like this. He saw it in the eyes of others, men who had lost themselves one reaction at a time. He clung to his promise, even as his body ached with the effort of restraint and his nights were haunted by the sense that something inevitable was approaching. The confrontation arrived at noon, when the yard was full and the sun left no shadows to hide in. Calder stepped into Malachi's path with deliberate slowness, the crowd forming a loose circle, drawn by the promise of blood. Guards watched from afar, weighing how long to wait before intervening. Calder's attack was sudden and cruel, meant to break spirit as much as bone. In that instant, Malachi felt the world narrow to breath and balance. He felt fear, sharp and real, not of pain but of losing himself. The first strike landed, and something ancient and disciplined awakened within him, not anger, but clarity. What followed was not a brawl fueled by rage, but a controlled storm. Malachi moved with a grace that seemed impossible in such a brutal place, redirecting force, grounding himself, refusing to escalate beyond what was necessary to survive. Each movement was precise, learned under open skies far from these walls, refined through years of respect for the human body and its limits. The yard fell silent, stunned not by the violence, but by the restraint. Calder's power crumbled in daylight, exposed as crude and unbalanced. When it ended, Malachi stood breathing hard, hands lowered, eyes steady, while Calder lay defeated not by humiliation, but by his own unchecked fury. The aftermath was heavy with disbelief. The guards rushed in, the circle broke, and the yard buzzed with a new kind of energy. Malachi was taken away, expecting punishment, ready to accept it. Instead, something unexpected followed him back to his cell. Respect. Not the loud, dangerous kind, but a quiet acknowledgement that rippled through the prison. Men who had watched saw not just strength, but control. They saw a man who could have destroyed, but chose not to. In the days that followed, the sun seemed less harsh. The threats faded. Calder's shadow shrank. Malachi returned to his routines, his body healing, his spirit cautiously hopeful. Change came slowly, in small daytime moments that mattered more than grand gestures. A nod from a man who once glared. Space made for him on a bench. Silence where there had been insults. Malachi began helping others train, not to fight, but to breathe, to focus, to survive without losing themselves. The yard transformed into something fragile and human under the sun, a place where men remembered they were more than their worst acts. Even guards noticed the shift, the way tension eased when discipline replaced chaos. Malachi understood then that his undefeated record had never been about winning fights. It was about winning the battle against becoming something he hated. Prison would still be prison. The days would still be long and unforgiving. But he had carved out a space of dignity in a place designed to erase it. He wrote letters during the day, worked toward education, and dreamed of a future where his strength could build instead of break. He knew redemption was not a single moment, but a choice made again and again under the same sun. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even in the darkest systems light can survive, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your engagement helps these stories of hope reach others who might need them today.